You know this feeling long before you have words for it. It arrives quietly, without drama, like a tired ache behind the eyes. Not the kind of exhaustion that sleep fixes, but the kind that comes from being needed too often, for too long. Your phone rings late at night, and you already know who it is. You sit at the edge of the bed, listening, nodding into the dark. Your voice stays calm, steady, reliable. Inside, something else is growing quiet. In the kitchen the next morning, the light is thin and pale. Coffee cools while you stand there, holding the cup with both hands. You notice how heavy it feels, as if it weighs more than it should. You don't think, I am tired of helping. You think, I just need to get through today. You have learned how to carry things for others. Their worries, their emergencies, their unfinished lives. You carry them the way someone carries water in open hands, carefully, constantly adjusting, afraid to spill even a drop. And people have come to trust this about you. They know you will hold it. They know you won't set it down. There is a particular silence that follows you now, not the peaceful kind. It's the silence after a long call ends, when the line goes dead, but your body is still leaning forward. The silence of a room that knows you've given something away and hasn't yet filled the space it left behind. You don't feel angry. That would almost be easier. What you feel is thinner than anger, duller than sadness, a kind of fading, as though the light inside you has been turned down slowly over many years, one small favor at a time. You remember moments when you wanted to say less, but didn't. Moments when you felt yourself emptying and told yourself it was love. You didn't keep score. You didn't ask for balance. You simply kept pouring. And now, sometimes, you notice your hands. How they ache even when they are empty. How they still curl as if holding something that is no longer there. You begin to sense, without accusation, without blame, that you have been carrying more than your share, and no one ever taught you how to stop without dropping yourself. We don't begin by giving too much. We begin by wanting to belong. Somewhere early on, you learn that being useful keeps you close, that answering quickly makes you matter, that stepping in smooths things over, and smoothness feels like safety. And so we begin to give, not dramatically, not selflessly in some grand way, but quietly, habitually, almost without noticing. There are small, invisible agreements we make with the world. You show up, and in return you are needed. You fix, and in return you are included. You stay available, and in return you are not forgotten. None of this is spoken. That's what makes it powerful. You feel it when the phone doesn't ring for a while. Not relief. Unease. A faint question in the body. Am I still necessary? And when it does ring again, even if you are tired, you answer. Because being tired with a role feels safer than resting without one. We tell ourselves we are just being kind. And we are. But kindness can hide fear the way politeness hides anger. The fear that if you stop giving, something essential will be taken away. Affection, belonging, your place in the room. You remember times when someone said, "I'm fine," and you knew they weren't. You stepped closer instead of waiting. You offered solutions before they asked for listening, not because you were controlling, but because stillness felt dangerous. If you didn't act, you might disappear from the moment. And there are other times. An unanswered message you check twice, then a third time. You tell yourself not to take it personally, but your body already has. So you give again later, something thoughtful, something helpful, just to re-establish the thread, just to feel the line go taut again. We don't overgive because we think too highly of ourselves. We overgive because we are quietly afraid we are not enough on our own. Afraid that without effort, without usefulness, without emotional labor, we might be set aside like a tool no longer needed. There is guilt tangled in this. Guilt at the thought of stopping. Guilt at imagining saying no, as if rest were betrayal, as if boundaries were abandonment. And so we confuse goodness with disappearance. We learn to measure our worth by how little space we take, how quickly we respond, how much we absorb without complaint. But underneath all that giving is a simple, tender hope that by erasing yourself carefully enough, you will finally be safe to keep. And here is the quiet paradox we begin to sense together. What you give to be loved is often what keeps you from being seen. There comes a moment, not loud, not dramatic, when something inside you pauses. You are still giving, still listening, still showing up. But a question slips in, uninvited, and everything tilts slightly because of it. What if this isn't kindness anymore? You don't ask it with bitterness. You ask it the way someone looks around a room they know well and suddenly notices how little air there is. The furniture hasn't changed. The doors are still where they've always been. But breathing feels harder than it should. You begin to see a pattern you couldn't see while you were inside it. How every request found you. How every gap became yours to fill. How your hands kept opening even when they were empty, simply because they had learned the shape of giving. This is not about other people being cruel. Most of them never meant to take so much. Water doesn't feel like theft to a thirsty person, but a well that never rests will eventually run dry, no matter how pure the water once was. You notice how tired kindness feels when it has no edge, how it starts to resemble obligation, how it turns your own life into a series of side rooms, places you pass through but never stay. You are always on the threshold, always leaning outward. There is a sadness in this realization, a real one, because it means admitting that something you were proud of has been hurting you, that what once felt like love has slowly become a way of leaving yourself behind. And yet, there is relief too, a soft exhale you didn't know you were holding. Because if this exhaustion has a shape, then it also has a cause. And if it has a cause, then it is not your nature that is broken. You begin to understand a quiet law of things. Fire warms because it is contained. A house shelters because it has walls. Even the heart knows how to beat because it closes as surely as it opens. A candle that tries to light every room does not become brighter. It disappears faster. You see now how goodness, stripped of limits, turns inward and consumes its own source. How generosity without rest becomes a slow erosion. How saying yes to everything can quietly become a lifelong no to yourself. This is not a call to harden. It is an invitation to be whole, to let your kindness breathe, to allow your presence to remain where your body is. You are not meant to be the open door for all passing weather. You are allowed a room of your own with the light on and the door gently closed, and the truth settles, clear and calm. What burns without boundary cannot keep its warmth. At first, it does not look like strength. It looks like hesitation, a pause where you used to move automatically. The phone lights up and you let it rest where it is, not from spite, not to teach anyone a lesson. You simply notice that answering would pull you away from yourself, and you choose to stay. This is the quiet beginning of refusal, not the kind that slams doors or raises voices, but the kind that stands at the threshold and does not step forward. You don't announce it, you don't explain it, you let the moment pass, and in that passing, something inside you remains intact. You start to feel the difference between walls and thresholds. Walls are built from fear. Thresholds are built from knowing where you end. A threshold is not an argument. It is a line that says, This far and no farther, without needing to say anything at all. There is a serenity in this that surprises you. You expected guilt to roar. Instead, it whispers and then quiets. Because you are no longer trying to convince anyone of your goodness. You are simply inhabiting it. You discover that silence can be a form of care. That stepping back can be cleaner than stepping in. That absence, when chosen with clarity, does not harm. It steadies. Like removing your hand from a flame without cursing the fire. You stop rehearsing explanations in your head. You stop preparing defenses. You realize how much energy that preparation once consumed. Whole rooms of your mind were filled with imagined conversations that never needed to happen. Now, you let the door close gently. Not locked, just closed. Outside, things continue as they always have. People adjust. Some are confused. Some barely notice. Life reorganizes itself around the space you no longer occupy. Inside, something settles. The air feels different, clearer, as if a window has been opened and the room is finally breathing again. You begin to understand that refusal does not require confrontation, that dignity does not need witnesses, that you are allowed to withdraw your presence without withdrawing your care. This is not withdrawal from love. It is love refusing to destroy its own source. You are no longer available in the ways that empty you, and because of that, you are more present where you remain. Your yes carries weight now, because it is no longer automatic. Your silence is not avoidance. It is discernment. You sit in the evening light. The curtains move slightly as the wind passes through. The phone is still. The house quiets. There is a moment when you realize that distance does not have to mean coldness, that stepping back can be a way of keeping something whole. Think of your life now as a small, simple house. Nothing grand. Just enough space to breathe. Light comes in through the windows in the morning, soft and unhurried. The rooms hold what belongs there. Your thoughts, your memories, your quiet joys. This house does not exist to impress anyone. It exists so you can live inside it. For a long time, the doors were always open. People came and went freely, carrying their noise, their urgency, their weather. You told yourself that an open door was love, and sometimes it was. But sometimes it meant the wind never stopped blowing through. The warmth never stayed. Now you understand something more subtle. A house with no doors is not generous. It is uninhabitable. So you begin to tend your threshold, not with suspicion, with care. You notice who arrives gently and who arrives in a rush, who wipes their feet without being asked, who storms in as if the space were owed to them. You do not argue with the storm. You simply close the door. Inside, the quiet gathers. Not the heavy quiet of loneliness, but the steady quiet of things in their place. The kind of quiet that lets you hear the clock ticking, the kettle warming, your own breath returning to you. You discover that this quiet has a warmth to it, like a lantern lit at dusk. It does not flood the countryside with light. It stays where it is, steady and visible, enough for those who truly wish to find their way. From outside, some may mistake this for withdrawal, but you know better. The lantern is not hiding. It is simply not chasing. In this space, your care becomes cleaner. You no longer rush toward every shadow. You trust that others have their own houses, their own doors, their own light to tend. You are not abandoning them. You are respecting the shape of their lives and the shape of yours. You feel gratitude for the space itself, for the walls that hold warmth, for the door that opens and closes without drama, for the understanding that harmony is not created by constant contact, but by right distance. You stand at the window in the evening. The light inside meets the dark outside without trying to conquer it. both are allowed to exist, and the truth settles gently, like a final breath before sleep. Distance, chosen with care, is a form of love. Now there is nothing left to prove. You feel it first as a loosening, not a victory, not a declaration. Just the quiet sense that you are no longer bracing yourself for what might be asked of you next. You remember how it began, with fatigue you couldn't explain, with kindness that felt heavy in your hands. Then came the seeing. The moment you realized that goodness without rest was costing you your own life. And after that, the turning away, not in anger, but in clarity. What remains now is simpler than all of it. You no longer scan the room for what needs fixing. You no longer listen with one ear on your own disappearance. You hear what is said, and you let the rest be unsaid. You feel the urge to explain rise and pass, like a wave that no longer needs your body to break against. There is a strange freedom in not defending your peace, in discovering that calm does not require witnesses, that the moment you stop narrating yourself, the story loosens its grip. You realize how much energy explanation once consumed, how every justification tied you back to the very patterns you were trying to escape. You see now that explaining was never about being understood. It was about asking permission to rest. And you no longer need permission. Some people will fill the silence with their own meanings. Let them. You are not responsible for the stories others tell when you stop performing in them. You have returned the weight that was never yours to carry. What surprises you most is not the quiet around you, but the quiet inside. The way your thoughts settle when they are no longer on duty. The way your body softens when it realizes the watch has ended. You still care, deeply. But care no longer means depletion. Love no longer means self-erasure. You have learned that presence, when chosen, is enough. There is space now, not emptiness as loss, but emptiness as openness, a clean table, a swept floor, nothing demanding to be done. You sit with yourself as you are. No explanations prepared, no debts outstanding, just the simple fact of being here and being whole. And in this final release, one truth remains, clear and steady. Peace does not ask to be understood.